Putin and Zelensky's rallying of the troops indicates a new phase in the war. On Tuesday, officials said that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made his latest visit to positions near the front line, while Russian President Vladimir Putin visited command posts of his forces fighting in Ukraine for the second time in 2 months. As the war enters its 14th month and Kyiv prepares a possible counteroffensive with Western-supplied weapons, the president made separate visits to different provinces on different days in an effort to strengthen the resolve of the troops. Russian state television aired a video from the Kremlin showing Vladimir Putin arriving by helicopter at the command post of Russian forces in the southern Ukrainian province of Kherson before continuing on to the headquarters of the Russian National Guard in the eastern Ukrainian province of Luhansk. Dmitry Peskov, a spokesman for the Kremlin, said that the meetings happened on Monday. Putin, always dressed formally, met with his top military officials for briefings during both of his stops. There was no way to know how close or far away the military headquarters were from the front lines because their locations were kept secret. There was also no way to confirm the video's legitimacy without using it. According to his office, Zelensky's latest visit to the front lines was on Tuesday, when he went to the city of Avdiivka in Donetsk province's east, where fierce fighting has been going on. He was briefed by soldiers on battle conditions and presented with medals. Zelensky's frequent cross-country train travel last month accelerated as he visited regions hard hit by Russia's all-out invasion. The Ukrainian leader's wartime travels are similarly kept under wraps until after he has left the area, much like Putin's. Photos released by Zelensky's office showed the Ukrainian president taking selfies with soldiers, eating cake with them, and drinking out of paper cups, in contrast to the official coverage of Putin's trip, which depicted him in mostly formal and ceremonial settings. Heavy fighting in the east, particularly around the city of Bakhmut in the Donetsk province, has resulted in a stalemate in Russia's war in Ukraine. This area has seen the longest and bloodiest battle so far, lasting for 812 months. Following local referendums that Ukraine and the West denounced as shams, Russia illegally annexed the provinces of Kherson, Luhansk, Donetsk, and Zaporizhia in September. Mikhailo Podolyak, an advisor to the Ukrainian president, has been extremely critical of Putin's visit, calling him the author of mass murders in the conflict and accusing him of degrading Ukraine. Some of the Luhansk province and the cities of Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia are still under Ukrainian control. Kherson province, including its namesake capital city, was ceded by Russian forces in November. Denis Pushilin, Moscow's appointee as governor of the occupied part of Donetsk province, traveled to Minsk, the capital of Belarus, and received backing from President Alexander Lukashenko, a Putin ally. The purpose of Pushilin's trip, according to analysts, was to remind Kyiv that Belarus might join Russia in the war, and that the Kremlin probably approved of the trip. Belarusian political analyst Valery Karbalevich said in a phone interview, "The Kremlin forces Minsk to get involved in the war more actively in order to pressure Ukraine with threats of Belarus joining." To emphasize that the threat from Belarus has not subsided, Pushilin's visit to Minsk was timed to coincide with Putin's visit to the occupied regions of Ukraine. On his tours, Putin brought icons to the military divisions and wished them a happy Orthodox Easter, which was celebrated on Sunday. Putin presented senior officers with a copy of an Orthodox icon he claimed once belonged to a Russian general from the 19th century during a speech at the Kherson headquarters. The senior officers who attended the meetings were the ones currently in Putin's good graces. Among the highest-ranking generals stationed at the Kherson base was Colonel General Mikhail Teplinsky, who commands Russia's airborne troops. Teplinsky is well liked by his soldiers because he is a career officer who rose through the ranks from lieutenant to chief of the elite military branch. However, after an argument with the top brass in the armed forces last fall, he was removed from his post temporarily. This year he was reinstated to his position, and his meeting with Putin was seen as further proof of his renewed popularity. Call General Alexander Lapin, a senior officer who greeted Putin in the Luhansk region, was relieved of his duties as commanding officer in northeastern Ukraine after being held responsible for a hasty Russian withdrawal from parts of Kharkiv province in September in the face of a Ukrainian counteroffensive. After meeting with Putin, Lapin was promoted to head of the ground forces. This showed that he had the confidence of the president. Putin's travels coincided with Ukrainian plans for a fresh offensive to retake occupied territory. He traveled to the Sea of Azov port city of Mariupol, currently under Russian control, last month. After 2 months of fierce fighting, the city fell in May 2022 to Russian forces. Ukrainian officials have claimed they are preparing for a counteroffensive while simultaneously depleting Russian forces in eastern Ukraine. According to Zelenskyy, if Russia seizes Bakhmut, Putin will have a head start on gathering international support for an agreement that will force Ukraine to make concessions in order to end the war. Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council Secretary Oleksiy Danilov told the Associated Press that the country's allies were providing assistance in assembling the heavy armored vehicles and ammunition that would be necessary for a counteroffensive. Meanwhile, Zelenskyy's office reports at least 3 civilian deaths and 11 injuries in Ukraine over the course of Monday and Tuesday. The office reported that the majority of deaths occurred in the eastern region of the Donbass, which consists of the provinces of Luhansk and Donetsk. In Kherson, artillery fire injured 6 people.